In the name of our risen Lord. Amen. Please be seated. So I've talked to you all before about this terminology, this term, synergism. Synergism. That's best described in a couple of ways. One is, if you take the human being, just any human being, you can pick one. Maybe you'd want to take a nomination from somebody here in the building. And then you break them down into their constituent parts. You take them and you extract all the water out, and you extract all the potassium out, you extract all of the niacin, you extract everything out of it, and you put them in various piles on a table, and then you try to put it back together again, and you realize you're not going to have a human being. The human being is more than the sum of its parts. The human being is more than the sum of its parts. Synergism, that's what that means. It means greater than the sum of its parts. Another way that you can look at this is you can look at it from a negative point of view. Well, let's start with the positive and then we'll move to the negative. The positive is if you put together a 120-voice choir, a 90-voice orchestra, a 90-piece orchestra, 1,500 people in an audience, a nice building with a lovely oriel window through which the sun shines and the moon lights the course of an evening, and you bring to that gathering the music of Beethoven, and you all do Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. What you get, when you bind all of those energies together, is something greater than the sum of its parts. And that greater than the sum of its parts changes the world in wonderful, wonderful ways. Anytime you get together a collective of, well, almost anything that has life and breath, you get greater than the sum of its parts. This is a reality. I'm not making this stuff up. Some stuff I do make up. This I'm not making up. Did I say that out loud? And then on the other side of it, if you look at, for instance, you take a person like, let's go with Hitler. And you bind next to him Goebbels, and you bind next to him Himmler, and you bind next to him Goering, and you bind next to him Jodl, and you bind next to them all of these people who were Nazis during the period of time in that horrible history of the world. When you bind all of them together and put all of their energies together, you get something which is larger than the sum of its parts. You get something pretty incredibly evil. And I think that you can only really encounter evil when you get that kind of a binding together of people. So you've got, well, let's think a minute about that particular evil. Think about that evil, how big and how powerful that was, how greater than the sum of its parts. And think about how many of the white corpuscles that we call the soldiers and the civilians and the people who gave their lives to fight that particular evil. Think about how many of those are buried in the graves across the whole of the world. And think about the number of individuals who come out of the farms and the communities across the world who have no idea what war is like and who go into this situation and who are changed forever. And think about how, by extension, their families are changed. And then you realize that the sum of that synergism, that greater than the sum of its parts, has great power and great energy. Amazing. Amazing. In the readings that I've been doing over the last few years, a woman by the name of Sarah Coakley, who's a doctor of theology, I don't know if that's her actual terminology, she's probably a PhD, but she is in the religion department at Harvard. She and a scientist who is Martin, I can't remember his name now, forgive me. Her name is Coakley, he is, doesn't matter. I'll remember about 2 o'clock this afternoon. And I'll call you each individually and tell you. Nowak, Martin Nowak is his name. They talk about how in the creation, in the means and method by which God is creating things, they talk about evolution and how things change and how the energy of God operates in the world. And they say, well, there are three ways that God creates, advances the realm of God in the animal sphere. And one of them is in mutation, which is an instant change between generations of one particular character, and you gather other characters in mutation. Then you have natural selection, which you all are aware of, and they argue that the third one is altruism. Altruism. And what is altruism? It's when we bind ourselves together in such a way that what we provide is greater than the sum of its parts. If you take this side of the church and you say, okay, we want to advance the realm of God, go about your business, and this side of the church chooses not to cooperate with each other, the realm of God is not as likely to be advanced as if this side of the church does cooperate with each other. And even so, by helping each other, by acknowledging each other, by giving up something that they have in order to realize the greater good, the synergism, they advance the realm of God. Jim, why are you talking about all this stuff? We were reading John's Gospel just not too long ago, and here we are off onto this synergism thing. Well, guess what? Sarah Coakley, Martin Nowak, and others are talking about altruism and so on and so forth in the 21st century. And Jesus was talking about it 2,000 years ago. That's what this is about. It's about synergism. It's about a community of God that Jesus says, I want you to bind yourselves together. I want you to bind yourselves together and to love each other as I have loved you. Because in doing so, you will change the world. Wow. You didn't realize Jesus was as smart as all that, did you? That it would take 2 Harvard PhDs to talk about it 2,000 years later. It's an extraordinary thing. And Jesus uses language here, or the Gospel writer John has Jesus use language here, which is significant. Jesus says, you're not my servants, you're my friends. You are my friends. And Jesus is not, in this instance, the Gospel writer John is not just talking to those persons gathered around him of an indeterminate number. We don't know how many people are in that gathering around Jesus. We don't know. But he's not just talking to them, he's talking to us. He's talking to us 2,000 years later. We are Jesus' friends. Now, what does that mean? You know, when we're in seminary, we're told you can be the priest to a congregation, but you can never be the friend. You can never be a friend to members of your congregation. You just can't do that. Why? Well, because if you become a friend, then what happens if you get into the confessional and somebody's your friend in the confessional? What happens then? What happens if somebody in the church, you know, and there's this whole list of really, really good reasons why a clergy person can't be a friend to the people in the congregation. But here we have John, the Gospel writer John, saying, Jesus says, I am your friend. And you are my friends. And what does that mean? You know, when I talk about this friendship thing, and I talk about this synergism thing, there's something especially, I think, beautiful. I think it's beautiful, y'all. It's beautiful. There's something beautiful about the synergism thing. And that is that in order to be a part of it, in order to work together, in order to bind yourself together, you don't really have to give up your chosen beliefs. You don't really have to give up the things that matter to you. You do not have to give up your perspective from whatever angle across the political spectrum that may be. You don't have to give that up. You can still be who you are. You can still become who God is creating you to be. You do not have to give that up. All you need to do is recognize the value of the other human being and acknowledge that God is working in that other human being, and that together you will create something better than what was before. Friendship. Friendship. I've got someplace I'm going with this, and that is that I want this congregation, I want this congregation to be a leader and to take the reins of leadership in this diocese. I want each of you to participate in this wherever you can and however you feel comfortable to do so. But I want us to demonstrate to the diocese, this is how we live together. And this is where we are going when we advance the realm of God. This is what I want. This is how strongly I feel about who you are and the strengths that you bring to this community. The strengths that you bring to this community. What does it mean to be friends? It means I have to like everything he does. No, I don't. It does not mean that. It means that I have to lay down and be a doormat and let people walk all over me because that way I'm not going to cause any trouble. No, it does not mean that either. It means you get to be who God is creating you to be. And that acknowledging the power of that person inside of you, acknowledging the strength of who that is inside of you, reach out to the other person and have them acknowledge the strength that they have in them, and you bind yourselves together. You put your hands together and say, I need you. That's what that means. That's what that means. 2,000 years ago, God in Jesus Christ is looking to the people gathered around him in this farewell discourse. And he is getting ready to go to the cross. And he is saying to these individuals, I need you. And not only that, but the world needs you. Wherever you are in this spectrum. Wherever you are. Whatever your faith looks like. Bind it to the person near you. As best you can. As best you can. No one is 100% successful, but as well as you can, do so. I have called you friends because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, I chose you. And that language reverberates through the 2,000 years. Through the 2,000 years. Whoever you are and wherever you are in your journey, God chooses you. And I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. Love one another. Bind yourselves to one another in whatever way you can. We'll be talking more in the future about this thing that I have, this bee that is in my bonnet. I will share more of that with you as we go forward. But one of the things that we need here now is you. And that song has been sung for thousands of years. Amen.